In this video, we're going to demonstrate checking the primary and auxiliary anti-creep on both E-type and F-type couplers, which is a requirement when a car is placed on shop or repair track, the operation of the coupler, proper setup of the uncoupling lever, and view coupler components for both E and F-type couplers. We've got some F components here. This is an F knuckle, F51. We have two different lock lift mechanisms. One is a paddle type, usually on the AN. The other one is a rotor eye type. They both work the same way. We have two different locks. One's a regular lock. The other one has these fingers, usually used on a rotary car. And when the car is turned over, the fingers come down and the car does not come uncoupled. Then we have the F thrower. And all these parts have F on it, so you want to make sure they go into F components. Now we have the E-type. We have the knuckle, which is an E50 knuckle. The lock, which is an E40. The lock lift mechanism, an E18. And then the thrower is an E30. Again, make sure you have the correct components for the correct type of coupler, E or F type. Now we're going to check proper operation of the coupler. But first, you want to have your Rule 1 gauges there for the coupler and knuckle, and check both of them to see if they're wore out or not. And if they are, replace components as needed. Now we're going to check the proper operation of the coupler. We pull up on the uncoupling lever and the knuckle opened freely, which is a good thing. Also, we're going to check to close it. The lock should go all the way down. If this doesn't work freely, then you want to replace components as needed. Now we're going to check the center of the coupler on the striker. So we're going to measure both sides. Make sure it's centered, which it is. Now we're going to look at our uncoupling lever. Make sure it's not bent or broken, and repair as needed. There's 4 figures in the field manual in Rule 22, so make sure you're measuring the correct uncoupling lever for the type of coupler or draft system that you have. But on this type, we're going to measure from the outside of the uncoupling lever bracket to the inside of the uncoupling lever, and it should be 3 3/4 to 4 1/4, which is 3 3/4, so we're good. But if it was outside the dimension, we would probably have to replace this one because it's a fixed uncoupling lever. You can't adjust it, but there are some that you can adjust. Once you adjust it and get it to the correct dimension, then you weld it in place, and then we should be good to go then. Next thing we're going to do is check our toggle clearance. Toggle clearance is the gap between the lock lifter and the uncoupling lever. That dimension is 1/4 to 1/2. This one is a 1/2 inch, so we're good. But if it was out of those dimensions, then we would have to adjust it. That 1/4 to 1/2 is the standard dimension for all uncoupling levers. Presently in the field manual in Rule 22, if it's less than 1/4, it needs to be adjusted at any time. Okay, next thing we're going to do is check primary anti-creep protection. We've got a figure from the field manual in Rule 16 for the E-type. We're going to place one small pry bar underneath the lock on top of the knuckle and the other one on the lock leg. And you can see the way the force is supposed to be, which way you're supposed to be pulling the pry bars. So I'm going to grab my 2 small pry bars, and I place the one underneath the lock on top of the knuckle. The other one is underneath and in front of the lock leg. and I'm prying back on the lock leg and prying down on the lock, you should not be able to force the lock high enough for the knuckle to open up. If you do, then you do not have primary anti-creep protection. Next, we're going to go over auxiliary anti-creep protection. This is a figure out of the field manual of the lock lift mechanism. So we're going to force the lock lift mechanism forward, and the prong should hit the bottom of the coupler body. And we'll put a pry bar on that lock leg and move it around, and the prong should stay on the coupler body. I've moved the lock lift mechanism forward, and I have the small pry bar moving around. We do have auxiliary anti-creep protection because the prong is still touching the coupler body. If it didn't, we wouldn't have auxiliary anti-creep protection. Now we're going to go over F-type. We're not going to go over the primary because it's the same process with the two small pry bars, one underneath the lock and the other one on the lock leg. But I am going to go over auxiliary. This is a figure of the lock lift mechanism in Rule 18. So I'm going to lift up on the lock lift mechanism and apply a pry bar in the rotor eye, and it should not open up. If it does, then we do not have auxiliary anti-creep protection. So I lifted up on the lock lift, I rotated the rotor eye, and so we do have auxiliary anti-creep protection. All this information is in the field manual in Rule 16, 17, and 18, and 22. Thank you.